Hey guys, you're watching the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all across the country. And as you look at communicating with patients, some of you are wondering, how do we get better at this? Well, I've got an expert today on how we can get to more yes, applying the principles of influence in dentistry with Dr. Chris Phelps. You will love this. Do not miss this. So do me a favor, grab a pen and hit the share button. We'll see you in a second. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show. We are having so much fun doing this, and thank you so much. Almost 16,000 of you following us today. Only been about 3 months, so I really appreciate it. Crazy grateful, and like I said, we're just having a lot of fun with this, and over 6,500 of you have found us on iTunes. So keep sending us requests, because I'm going to do the best I can to get all the stuff that you guys are asking for, and today is definitely one of them. And we're going to be talking about how patients get to more of yes using a science. This is predictable, and it's proven, and it's a scientific process, and you'll see why here in just a second. Now, a couple show notes before we get started. We are shooting this live on Facebook, so if you're watching the stream during the broadcast and you have a question, do me a favor, add it to the feed, and I will ask Chris himself, and we'll get the answers straight from the top. And then also, if you're watching this after the live broadcast, don't be afraid to add the question to the feed, because we want to make sure you're getting the right answers for the questions you might have. Now, my guest today, been a good friend of mine for a long time, and I got a chance to meet him through a whole bunch of CE that I was taking, and actually a coaching program that I was going through called Strategic Coach. And you and I met up in Chicago before you were going to, and I think you paid for dinner at the Charcoal Grill that one night. So I'm so grateful. And I've gotten to know you, and I've had, you've spoken at a lot of our events. You actually have your own training program now, and you are one of the few dentists, I think you're the only dentist in the world that is a certified trainer in the principles of influence through Dr. Robert Cialdini. Now, I know who you are, but if somebody's watching this and doesn't know who Dr. Christopher Phelps is, can you share with us a little bit about your story and who you are and where you practice?
Yeah, definitely. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. Graduated from dental school in 2003, which is a little hard to believe how many years have passed since then. So a few years under my belt. Started out, I joined a small practice, fee-for-service office, which was really cool. But it was an old house that had been renovated to a dental office. And the dentist had actually been my wife's dentist since she was 14, which was kind of cool. And being from North Carolina, I knew I wanted to go to a bigger city than Greensboro, where I grew up. So I thought, well, it's either Charlotte or Raleigh. And I talked to Dr. Grimes, who was the guy I went in with, and I said, hey, what do you think about me coming in with you? I'm graduating in a month or two. And like typical Grimes fashion, in his southern drawl, he was like, well, I'm not going to lie to you. I've had associates in the past. None of them seem to work out, but you're welcome to come try. And of course, what I heard was, so you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah.
I like it, And I said, I'll take it. And it was really cool, because not many people, especially back in 2003, had a true fee-for-service office. So, a patient paid $1,200 for their crown today. He filed their insurance, and they waited on the $400 or $500 reimbursement, which was kind of unique. It was kind of scarce, that it kind of drove me. So I bought into the practice within a few months, and over the next 6 years, I grew us to 4 different locations, and we 10 times the revenue from when the year before I started. So kind of a great journey along the way. And then I did something nuts. Most people think I'm insane. I sold my 2 highest producing least debt practices, and I took over my 2 highest debt least producing practices. Right. Wow. So I sold the ones that were making money, and I took over the ones costing me money. And one of them was a cold start office that was only about 10 months old, but I was writing checks for $70,000 a month in expenses, and we were getting about $35,000 a month in that office in collections. So talking about, bad deal, it was an interesting time, let me tell you. And, but I'll tell you what, necessity is the mother of invention. And there's nothing like writing big checks to be a powerful motivator to figure out what's going on in your life. and how to fix it, and it really got my brain working on ways to overcome those challenges, overcome those hurdles. And some companies I've developed have come out of that, as well as how I grew those offices. So I think they were doing maybe 1.6 million the year I took them over. And then 3 years later, we did 6 million between the two of them. So basically I did with 2 offices what I used to do with 4 offices. And then just over almost 2 years ago, I sold one of those. And now I've got a plan to do 6 million in one of my last office, my original one. Right. So basically, instead of growing for growth's sake, trying to maximize the capacity of what I've got, kind of stuff. And a big factor, and one of my big reasons why I've been able to do that is it was right after I sold those 2 best practices that I heard Dr. Robert Cialdini speak for the first time and talk about his 6 principles of influence and ethical persuasion. And for me, one of our, Dan Sullivan in Strategic Coach always says your brain can't really tackle the problem until it gets to the why, until you break it down into its elements. And then your brain can start working on solutions to the problem. And until that point, I really hadn't had I got into the why. I really had no reason behind it. And I started to hear him talking about the science behind these principles. And it got me thinking and analyzing the problems in my practice. And I was like, holy cow, these are the root causes for some of the, if not all of the major problems in my practice. So if I can go to the source, if I can learn and really understand the science behind these things, then I can use these in my practice and change things. And that's what kind of drew me to it, because it is based in science that told me that it's been tested time and time again, study after study, to back up their claims. If it's been tested, that means it's reproducible. If it worked in their setting, if I used it in a similar setting, it should work for me. And if it's reproducible, that also means that it's learnable. Anyone can learn to be more persuasive and have more influence and do this in an ethical way. And so when I had the opportunity to go learn from Cialdini directly, I studied under him for almost a year before I got my certification complete. It really helped me understand him to the fullest and go, all right, now I've got these great concepts, but what are you going to do with it? Right. And that's one of the things he kind of leaned on me for dentistry was, how do I use these principles and how do we put them into action? So I went about tackling each of my little problems and created little influence systems. And the turnaround, as you saw, right, from 1.6 million to 6 million in 3 years. It was a dramatic change in a very small amount of time. And that's what happens when, I know a lot of people are dying to get patients in the door, right, to get butts in the chair, which is great. That's a catalyst for growth. But if nobody's saying yes to treatment, if nobody's coming back, I don't care how good of a clinician you are, right? You're not going to be able to put your skills to use. So how do we set the stage in an ethical way to get more people to say yes? And that's really what I've been focusing on.
Yeah. Now, a couple things. If you're watching this and you're not familiar with what Chris and I are referring to, the individual's name, his name is Robert Cialdini, spelled Cialdini. Is that right? Okay, so there's no H in it, and he's written several books. Probably my favorite is the influence book. What is it? The Power of Influence.
The Science and Practice. Influence.
Okay, so that's probably where you want to start. He also just wrote a book called Persuasion, which we're going to talk about here in a second, which you're very familiar with, and you were just with him recently. So I would highly suggest please read this book because it'll help you with what Chris and I are going to be talking about. The other thing I just want to say about you, too, I forgot about this one. I had heard about you long before I met you, and it was from a Dr. Brian Smith. So I said, have you heard of this Phelps guy? He's like, dude, that guy's a serial entrepreneur. In dental school, he started a business where he would take all the courses and he would summarize them because we wouldn't go, and he would sell the notes from the courses. And you actually had a thriving business before you even graduated, right?
Yeah, it actually supplemented my whole dental school education. It helped pay for my apartment, you name it. And it was just part of my process. That's how I had to learn the material. It was a very slow and ugly process, but I condensed every dental school test down to 5 pages front and back. And I was very good at figuring out what was the meat, what was the most important thing you needed to learn. And it even got to where I would put a TQ by certain things. And apparently it's still going on in my dental school. It's still famous, the TQ. For test question, I'd say, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a test question. This one's probably going to be a test question. And almost every time I was right. It got to be uncanny.
That is hilarious. So my point is, you can't help yourself. You're like one of those people that has to constantly be looking for a solution. And that's why I enjoy our relationship so much, because every time I talk to you, you're up to some big new grand scheme that's come out of necessity. Do you know what I mean? Like you're already designing a business based on some of the challenges dentists are experiencing. So let's go into the principles. Now, when you talk about, now, why is influence so important? You talked about this a little bit, but I want to talk about why this is so important, the principles of influence in dentistry right now.
Well, because it's a huge need. Communication skills are at an all-time high, right? Patients have more choices than they ever had before. So our ability to communicate with them in a way, and most of our colleagues think they have we're going to talk about scarcity, but they have a very scarcity mindset with each other. They're very competitive towards each other. And so they think that they're competing with each other for business, for new patients. But the reality is we should have an abundance mindset. There's more than enough patients for all of us. Who we're competing with is not each other. Who are we competing with? What the patients are spending their money on besides us. Right? That's who we're really competing with. So why this is so important is that it ethically reframes their perspective in that moment. So the idea is, people buy what they want, but they don't buy what they need necessarily, right? But what we're communicating and trying to present to them is their need, their dental need. So what these influence principles do is reframe their perspective and turn that need into a want, because we're comparing and contrasting it to what they're spending their money on and why they need to make this the priority instead.
Right. So let's name them. There's 6 principles of influence, and we're going to name them and go through each one of them. So this is the part of the broadcast that you're going to want to take notes. So what are the 6?
Yeah. So the first one is reciprocity. And most people have heard this before, right? If you give someone a gift of value, people tend to feel the need to reciprocate and give back at some point. If you do a favor for your buddy or a friend or even a perfect stranger, many times they're going to feel the need to offer you help back. Right? Return for that favor or do a favor for you as a result. I learned this when we had my oldest son, who's getting ready to be 10 tomorrow. That's hard to believe. His 3rd birthday party, and it was his first official party without family, right? So we had little friends from his preschool class, and my wife had asked me to get the balloons and the cake, and then she asked me to go back to the laundry room and get one more thing. And I go back and I pick up this basket of little presents all wrapped up, and I was like, honey, what are these little presents? She goes, oh, that's for the kids coming to the party. I was like, wait, let me get this straight. So the kids who come to our kids' party are bringing our kid a gift, and we're giving them a gift for coming? She goes, yeah. I said, why are we doing that? She goes, I don't know. That's just what you do.
Yeah.
So now I know exactly what it is. That's reciprocity. Okay.
Yeah.
So ingrained in our culture in every aspect. Okay. You see it. At the time, I didn't know. I was like, okay, that's what we do. Right.
Yeah.
So that's reciprocity.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't even know that's happening. Like, I love it. I'm just thinking, like, I'm having all these flashbacks. Like, when a waiter comes to the table and they give you, a little gift from the chef before we get started. You're like, now you're in a position of what Cialdini says, in principle, we want to repay that gift, right? Is that how that works?
Yeah, and the sooner you can repay it, the better. That's why there's a moment of power there where if you give someone that gift, if we turn around and ask for something in that moment, we're likely to get a yes. It sets the stage for a yes. Right? Because they want to repay that kindness or that gift or whatever as soon as possible. So if they can do that in that moment, they've satisfied what they feel is their obligation, then they're happy. And they're content.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you a question? Because I'm getting a lot of emails and feedback from offices. They're like, we're watching these with our team. So if I'm a dentist and I'm, let's say, 32 and I'm watching this with my team, how does that apply to a dental practice? Because I totally get it, but how would I use that on a daily basis?
Well, first, it comes from recognizing when you've actually given someone a gift, whether you realize it or not. So if you're sitting up a new patient or an existing patient and they're sitting up in the chair and they say a positive comment about their experience, like, oh, wow, I can't believe we're done already, or wow, I didn't feel a thing, or I didn't feel the doctor's shot at all, right? Many times we think gifts have to be these physical things we hand people, but a lot of times they could be intangible things, right? Like favors and those kind of things. And so when they tell you these things, you've given them a gift already. You just didn't even realize it. That's a perfect time to go, well, great. I'm glad you had a great experience. I tell you, would you mind pulling out your phone and let's do a Google review and maybe you can share that with others. Would you help us out with that? Perfect opportunity for that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right there in the moment. Sometimes I recommend a gift card program. So if you want more referrals, let's say. So we'll have a couple of options of gift cards, and then we'll offer to the patient and say, hey, Mrs. Jones, we just want to thank you for coming in today, the doc and I. We really appreciate you because we know you have a choice and you choose us. So to say thank you, I've got a couple gift cards here. I'll tell you what, why don't you pick one for yourself?
Right.
And if they pick one, right, then that gift means something to them. There's some influence power there. If they thank you for it, then you turn around and say, my pleasure. Oh, and by the way, do you know anybody looking for a good dentist? Of course, great. What'd you tell them about us? I mean, it's subtle, but powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, now that I think of it, we could probably come up with 30 here just talking about these. One that comes to mind is I'm watching a lot of people do, you know how a lot of offices give bags that are, you know, very much branded with everything from your practice. They're doing them on the front end of the visit now instead of the back end of the visit. Yep. And saying, hey, look, you know, we're so excited. I'm going to start with you with a couple gifts. And these are very important because of your oral health, a couple things. Now you're going to get them. And I've just gotten so much feedback from it's like, it changes the whole energy of the visit instead of trying to give it to them at the end. And, oh, by the way, here's an extra bonus. So awesome stuff. So reciprocity, hugely important. Now, what's principle number 2?
So principle number 2 is the liking principle, right? We like to do business with people we like. It's as simple as that. And it reminds me of a patient I had one time who came in as a new patient. And I hate to say we judge people sometimes when we look at them, but we all know we judge people sometimes when we look at them. And on the surface, I swear, I remember telling myself, golly, I have nothing in common with this person. I mean, there's nothing visibly there. Like, what am I going to talk about, right? And so I was kind of hoping that at least one of the female associates in my practice would get her as their doctor to because at least, hey, you're a girl, I'm a girl, right? At least we got that. If you're a woman, I'm a woman. I don't even have that in common. So I was like, let's see what happens. But lo and behold, sure enough, it was my turn to go check. And I was like, all right, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but I'll figure something out, right? And so with liking, we say we like to do business with those we like, but also we like to do business with those who are like us, who have similarities, who have commonalities, and it's common interest.
We apologize for the technical glitch. Here is point number 3.
We look to others to show us what we should do. So I don't know whatever that class was in 7th grade that went over like etiquette at restaurants and with all the forks and knives and whose drink is this and where's my bread bowl. I apparently missed that day because it just never stuck. So every time I'm in that situation, I'm like, crap, what do I do? And I'm looking at other tables going, wait, oh, that's what that thing's for. Okay. So we look to others to show us what we should be doing in many situations. So the behavior of what others around us are doing can have a big impact and influence on us. And there's so many examples of that. I liken it to people don't like to stand out from a crowd, right? So if a group of people know that they're in the minority in your practice, like they're not doing the behavior of what the majority are doing, just by simply sharing that information with the minority is enough to influence many of them, sometimes up to 2/3 of them, to come in and start doing what the majority are doing.
Right.
Only because they know they're in the minority. Right. And it goes back to like a fundamental law of human nature. If you're in a school of fish or if you're in a herd, what happens when you get outside of the herd?
You feel lost sometimes.
Yeah, and you get eaten.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bad things happen when you stick out from the herd. Okay. So that's human nature. It's an influence principle. We don't want to stick out from the herd. So if we know we are and we're not doing what everybody else is doing, that's enough to influence us to start following through and doing the same.
Well, and again, I'm having all these things happen in my brain while you're describing these principles, like when a waiter comes over and says, that is hands down our favorite dish. Everybody loves that dish. You know, that's a great example. And also, too, when you watch either buying trends or anything, you know, you're like, well, I got to have one of those. Everybody else has got one, too. Or Amazon reviews. You look at Amazon reviews. If people don't, you know, that would probably apply to a couple principles, but when you see something has been purchased and reviewed a lot, whether you call them vanity metrics or not, you're like, okay, well, this is tried and true because there's so many people that say it is true.
And Amazon actually built their entire business model initially off this consensus principle. If you think about it, they were the first place you could go that if you wanted a vacuum cleaner or interested in buying one, you could see that 5,000 people bought this vacuum cleaner and said something nice about it.
That's so true.
So if I want a vacuum cleaner and that many people said yes to that one and they liked it, maybe I'll be safe buying that one too.
Right.
And that alone is these small little things that we don't think about are what people use to make their everyday decisions. You know, too many times you think it's IQ, like it's logic, or it's your emotions. Now, emotions are a powerful motivator, and you do make decisions off of emotions. But I don't know if you realize this, but studies show that 90% of our day, our brain is on automatic pilot. Okay. So logic and emotion are not making the decisions or driving the car, okay? It's your natural instincts, and these other little things our brains are looking for to help us make a quick decision. And, seeing what other people are doing is enough to satisfy your brain to say, well, if that many people are doing it, great. I'm probably going to be safe doing it too. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, again, I'll always bring this back to a practice. When you're setting the stage for yes in a patient relationship, give us some thoughts on, how we could apply this to the practice on consensus or social proof in addition to what you've already shared.
Well, this is a great one of those indirect influencers that it's not really coming from you. They should see it in the practice, right? So they should see what others are doing. So one of the things you'll see when you walk into my office, if you look to the reception area to my right, is a whole wall of before and after photos. Okay, a whole wall of them, like over 25, maybe 40 cases up on the wall. I can't remember what the total number is. It's a lot. Okay, and we got them kind of a nice mounted canvas kind of style. You can put some full face photos up there, even better. But what that's showing people without us ever having to say anything is, geez, look how many people got their teeth done here. And wow, look how nice they turned out. So if I'm in the market, or if I'm interested in cosmetic work, I must be in the right place. It's probably going to be safe getting it done here too.
Right.
So that is everything I need to say about why we may be the best place to get it done, right, without me ever having to say that.
Right. I'm also thinking in terms of when people call you and say, do you take my insurance or anything like that? You could authentically say to them, we get that question a lot from many people that work at the plant, just like you, and you're not alone. Basically what it comes down to is you're not alone. There's a lot of people just like you. And here's what they do as evidence by what you see here or what I'm going to show you here. So I love that. So consensus and social proof. Now, what's principle number 4?
So the next one is the authority principle, right? Okay. So many times we look to credible experts to tell us what we should do, right? I don't have time to be the expert or study that topic or area. So if you're the expert and you tell me I need this, more often than not, that's enough for me to make my decision. Name me one dental product right now that doesn't have some dentist face in front of it. Okay. Right. They're trying to tap into the authority principle. Well, if that doc uses it, well, he's probably done his homework. It works for him. It'll probably work for me. It's as simple as that. When I tried to fix a toilet one time in my life, and I watched my dad growing up. He could fix anything. Several times our toilet would get busted and he would fix it. And I was in college one time and at a party and a buddy of mine's, and his toilet was running. And I thought, I don't know why, maybe it was a couple beers I had, but I thought, well, I can fix this thing. I got this. So I take the lid off. Right? I pick up the little balloon in the toilet to get it to stop running. And I'm just staring at the thing. And lo and behold, there's these 2 little rubber gaskets at the very bottom of the toilet I'd never noticed before. Yeah, they both just shot out. Water was going everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened? Right? So I knew very quickly that I was not born to be a plumber. Okay. So now if a plumber comes to my house and says, I need a new toilet, you're the expert, you're the authority in this. I guess I'm paying for a new toilet. I'm not questioning it or whatever. So that's what it means. We're looking to credible experts, but it really comes from not us trying to present ourselves as the authority, but from other people, other items, okay, to present us as the authority instead.
Okay, like give us an example.
Well, even something simple as that we talk about, unfortunately with our team members, the more experts or authorities in the office that are telling the patient they need something done, the more likely they are to get it done, right? So if you have a patient ever come in for a second opinion, that's great because now you're the second authority that's told them they need something, even though it may be a little different than the other one, okay? And always the second person usually wins. But what if you could do that in your office? What if we could turn our team members into the authorities they should be in the patient's eyes? Because right now, I can tell you, they don't look at them as authorities. They look at them as technicians.
Right.
Right? And the reason why is because they have no idea what their training is. No clue.
Right.
We talk about physical therapists, and do you know, like physical therapists, how long they go to school these days?
I don't know.
I didn't either, right? And apparently they're PhDs now when they get out of school. Okay, so they've got some credentials, but nobody knows that. Okay,
yeah.
So with our team, it's the same thing. So if we can do simple little things by putting their credentials on the wall, their licenses and all their CE they've done, right, all their expertise, and showing that to the patient, now when the hygienist tells them they have scale and group planing issues and periodontal disease, it's going to have more weight. And then the doctor's coming in to reinforce that. Now I got 2 experts telling me I need to get this done.
Yeah. That's powerful. And it's so easy to use restaurants, but a lot of times when a server will come to the table and say, our chef is a James Beard award winner,
Yep.
And we hand select all of our beef on Mondays. So everything and all of our vegetables are organic. You're actually building a lot of authority for this. And the other thing I've just noticed, I'm watching a lot of dentists really adapt video. And what's really interesting is that anybody you see on video for any reason, you instantly think that guy's an expert for some reason because I saw him on YouTube. People are like, well, I saw him on YouTube, so it must be real. I mean, he is the guy because he did a video on what a dental implant is, right?
Exactly. Well, that's one of the shortcuts of authority we look to for success. TV, internet can present you as an authority just for no other reason than the fact that you're on TV or the internet. Ask Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil who they have to thank for their celebrity status and their position right now, right? Oprah.
Yeah.
She put them both on the map, right? Only because people trusted her and she said, these are my guys.
Yep.
Boom,
Absolutely. Yeah. So she did that with many people. Yeah. I mean, she's single-handedly a brand builder by herself. Now, influence concept number 5. What's number 5?
All right. So 5 is what they call the consistency principle. Okay. And for me, it was probably the root cause for the majority of the issues going on in my practice. And I think most practices out there today. Okay. And when I say consistency, I want you to think commitments. So the idea is if you can get people to make a real commitment, okay, there's a lot of external and internal pressure on them to stay consistent and follow through and do with what they said they were going to do. So think of it this way. What do we call people in society who are inconsistent, who don't do what they said they were going to do?
Call them flaky. Yeah.
Do we have any good names for them?
No, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, and a big one that comes to mind for me is liars, right? That's what a person who says they're going to do something and doesn't do what they said they were going to do. So none of us want to be perceived that way, right? So if we really make a commitment to do it, more often than not, we're going to follow through and do it. The problem I find in dentistry is from the telephone calls to scheduling appointments to whatever, we're not getting real commitments out of people. And so we're wondering, well, why aren't they scheduling their next appointment? Why did they no-show for that appointment? Why didn't they pay their bill? Why didn't they refer someone? Because honestly, you didn't get a real commitment out of them to do it.
Right.
And people don't do what they don't commit to.
Right. That's so interesting. Now, and again, the brand that I think about the most that has is Amazon. I mean, Amazon's never failed, and you think about companies that have very poor consistency, like the post office or, anything. I mean, you could have a long list of examples about how you build your faith in these brands and you spend more money with people that are tremendously consistent. Now, can you just speak a little bit more about this one? Because I'm sure if anybody's watching this is the biggest problem in most every dental practice. And you really have to have very good systems when you say commitments. Can you give us just a little bit more perspective? Because you've done this in multiple practices. How do you make this happen?
Yeah, well, like I said, it applies in all different kinds of ways. So let's go back to the referrals, right? We already started that process by saying, hey, here's a couple of gift cards from us. Choose one for yourself. Oh, great. Thank you. Hey, my pleasure. Do you know of anybody looking for a good dentist? Yes. Great. So we have a little potential new patient gift bag ready to go. Okay. And it's got kind of our normal swag in there, right? Your branded logo, pens, coffee cup, whatever you want to put in there. Your business cards, toothbrush, floss, etc. But I actually throw a gift card in the bag too for the potential new patient. Okay. Whatever your most popular gift card is. Okay. And I'll say, hey, would you mind passing on this gift bag to that person for me when you see him next time and say, we'd love to meet him.
That's awesome.
And when they say yes, what have they just done? They just made a commitment.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Before, there was no commitment. All they said was, yeah, I know somebody looking for a good dentist. Will you tell somebody? Yeah, sure, maybe. If I think about it. But now, not only do we have to get them to make a commitment, the real power comes when you remind them of the commitment they made.
Okay, so how do you do that?
That's what the bag does.
It's the constant visual reminder. You're also going to give me a bad guilt trip about myself if I even think about using the card that's in the gift bag, right?
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So every morning they're getting up out of bed and this bag is sitting on the kitchen counter and they're looking at it going, oh, crap, I did say I'd pass that thing on.
Yeah.
But again, they can't just pass it on and say, oh, hey, here's my dentist, go see him. They're going to sound weird, right? So they're actually going to invoke the liking principle, and they're going to tell that person everything they love about you, why they like you. But at the same time, they're going to tell their story of why they like you. Hey, he's a great dentist. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel the cleaning. They always treat me so well. They're going to give their testimonial. And what that's doing is it's building your authority at the same time. So it's hitting multiple triggers, multiple influence principles, all in one fell swoop. But ideally, reminding them of the commitment they made to pass that thing on. And most people, they're going to pass it on.
Yeah, and that's I would consider that kind of an advanced principle, and it's an awesome one. But like if you're a dentist even listening to this, one of the simple principles regarding this consistency would just be being on time. Pete Dawson said it years ago, you could actually build a practice, just do one thing, just be on time. Because when you're not on time, I mean, the consistency is all over the place, and you can see people just get angry with you, no matter how nice you are in that respect.
Definitely.
Yeah. So good stuff. Now, principle number 6. What's number 6?
So 6 is probably the one that's most abused, I would say, or used sometimes in an unethical way against us. And it kind of gives persuasion a bad name, right? Many times I'll mention the word persuasion and I see people go, ooh, what is that? Are we tricking people or are we manipulating them? I don't want to do that. And that's not really what persuasion is, or influence. Okay. What they're talking about is really coercion or intimidation. Right? If you put a gun to somebody's head, that's coercing them, right? Or blackmailing them is coercing them. Do this or else, right? Yeah, you got a choice, but you're probably going to do it because you don't want the else. But as soon as the gun goes away, your behavior doesn't really change. You go back to the way you were doing it. And so you got to be careful of those things. So persuasion, on the other hand, we're using these things in an ethical manner when they're in the moment, not making them up, not tricking people. As I like to say, they're not guarantees for a yes because you can't make people do something they don't really want to do. Okay, without the gun. Okay, but outside of that, you can't really make them do something they don't want to do. So with scarcity, you actually can use this in an ethical way. And scarcity is all about loss, right? It's all about resources. When resources are dwindling and they're disappearing on you, suddenly we want it more and we'll pay more to get it, even if we didn't want it before.
Right.
This happens to me every time I'm at Starbucks, right? I love the banana bread there. And every time I'm in line, they make you stare at the food for a reason, okay, to tempt you. And as long as there's like 5 or 6 little loaves in there, I'm good. I can resist. But whenever it gets down to like 1 or 2 loaves, I'm always like, yeah, but if I want something, I may come back for it, maybe gone. Crap, I guess I'll get it. All right, I'll take the banana loaf. And it gets me every time. Even though I know it's ridiculous because I know even though there's only one laying out, they've got a whole closet full of them, right? But it's all in my head, but it still works. We don't want it till suddenly we can't get it. And typically we'll pay more for it. And so when it comes to this loss and things we're missing out on, okay, it reminds me of a patient who came in and they needed Invisalign therapy, right? And I had seen them like 10 years before and their teeth, and I asked them the magic question on all of our dental forms since, I don't know, the 80s, rate your smile 1 to 10. Do you see any problems with your smile or whatever? And I hate that question. So, I've since thrown it out. But when I asked her that question 10 years ago, guess what she said? No, there's nothing about it. I think my smile is great. Even though I'm like, yeah, but you got a little crowding here. You got a little open bite between your laterals. I mean, it's not perfect. I mean, yeah, it's not bad, but it could be better. But she had no interest at that time because she didn't perceive her smile as being bad, right? Well, 10 years later, her teeth were all jacked up. As we know, right, when teeth are crowded or having spacing or in some malposition, do they stay put or do they get worse over time?
Right.
They keep shifting, right? So 10 years later, now it was a big concern for her, and she was coming in for Invisalign. Well, I happened to see a new patient in hygiene when we were taking her impressions. And lo and behold, her smile reminded me of that patient's smile 10 years ago. And I said, hang on a second, I'll be right back. And I dismissed myself from the new patient. And I went in to the Invisalign patient, and I was like, Sally, do you mind can I borrow you for a second? Will you help me with something? She goes, yeah, what's going on? And I said, do you mind if I use you as a cautionary tale? She was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I was like, okay, come here. And so I took her in there to meet the new patient. I was like, Tina, this is Sally. Tina, I know this is a little weird. Forgive me, but there's a method to the madness here. Just bear with me. And I said, I just want to introduce you. I said, and Sally, I was looking at Tina's mouth, and it reminded me of your smile. I said, would you mind showing us real quick what your smile is? And she smiled at us. And right on cue, Sally was like, yeah, that's what my teeth used to look like 10 years ago. And I was like, I know, that's exactly what I thought. And I said, hey, would you mind, Sally, sharing with Tina what your smile looks like today? And she smiled and showed her teeth were all over the place, crossbite in one area. And I was looking at the patient in the chair and I saw her eyes go, oh. And I was like, all right, we're done. And I thanked them and, took the patient back and I thanked her for helping me. And I went back in and I sat down with her and I said, hey, did you know that even though your smile may not look that bad today, and I showed her in a mirror where her teeth were malpositioned and the indiscrepancies, I said that because you've got some crowding and overlap today, it's going to continue to get worse. And in 5 to 10 years, it could look like Sally. Mm-hmm. Does that concern you? Oh, I don't want my teeth moving. I don't want that to happen. Ah, okay, great. Well, let's talk about some of your options. So you see what I did there? I highlighted the scarcity of what she stood to lose, which was her current tooth position today. Mm-hmm. And she didn't even know that was a possibility or that was going to happen. And as I like to tell people, scarcity, it does have some fear in it, okay?
Right.
It's motivating to act. But when it's truthful and it's ethical, right, you got to share this with people. As I often say, if people really knew what we knew was going to happen to their teeth, that it was going to cost them more time, effort, energy, appointments, pain later on by waiting, most people, the majority, would prefer to not let that happen and would prefer to get it done today.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Scarcity can be such a powerful motivator for action today.
Yeah, it is. And now if you're watching this, you already use this scarcity measure and you probably use it extremely well. You never want to tell a patient, we can see you anytime. What works for you? You never say that. You always look at the schedule and say, look, I've got this time or this time. You're never giving a patient 9 options, because the more options, as you've already shared with me in previous meetings, the more options you give people, it's confusing. Can you just talk about that? Because there's a book called The Paradox of Choice that you made me rig that is fantastic. Now, just talk about that.
Well, it just kind of hits on the science of choice. And the simple fact is, number one, people need a choice, right? They need more than one option, okay? If you don't give them more than one option, they didn't really make a choice, and therefore they didn't really commit to it. So it goes back to the commitment principle. But at the same time, the more choices we give them, the less likely they are to pick anything, only because we gave them so many choices. They're just uncertain about which one to choose, okay? For no other reason, right? They just can't legally make a decision because it's just too many options. So the idea is we need to give them a choice, but try to limit that as much as possible. So for me, 2 to 3 is the magic number. I'm trying to limit it to 2 to 3, but I'll tell you what, if they really have 4 options, I'll tell them the 4 options. But the idea is you have to figure out a way strategically to then, after you've educated them on those options, to ask them commitment questions and funnel them back to one plan. Mm-hmm. One plan that they commit to and every time they answer your questions, they're making more and more and more of a commitment to get it done.
Yeah. It's good that you're giving us the tool of commitment, because these are great. You just have to know how to use them. And again, as you're describing all these principles, you can think, my wife always reminds me, the sale ends for this tomorrow. Like we have to, I'm like, well, the sale ends when? Tomorrow. So what? So we'll buy it next week. She's like, no, it's 10% off until tomorrow. Midnight, it's over. So I was ordering a rug the other night because it had to be, before midnight. And then Travelocity does this all the time. So when I purchase my flights, they'll say 3 fares left at this price. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm like,
limited quantities, man. You don't want it till that may not be there in a minute. Oh man, I got to do something.
Yeah. While supplies last. I mean, I always joke with my family, but I joke with everybody else. You never go to a restaurant that has nobody in it. I drive by a restaurant and there's nobody in it. I'm like, well, I can't be that good. But if I call a restaurant and they go, man, I have 1 table left and it's at 7:30, I'm like, I want it. I always want what I can't have.
That's it. I'll take it every.
Absolutely. Now, give us just a little bit more framework. This might be new to people. So what would you suggest? Like, if I've never been exposed to these, where would I just start? Give me like a simple little treatment plan over the next week or two. Where, what would you suggest somebody that's not been exposed to this? Where do you start?
Well, I would say a good foundation is to read Dr. Cialdini's book. I mean, that's a great start. It's going to go through all the principles again. It'll give you study after study reinforcing that these things are legitimate. There's a lot of science behind them. And it will automatically start generating some ideas for you on how to start putting them into action. And that's kind of what I do as one of the trainers. I have a 2-day workshop, but that's all I focus on is trying to train doctors and their teams on how all these systems I've created to use these influence principles to decrease no-shows, to actually get people to show up for their appointment, to get people to pay their bill today, to refer somebody, as we've been talking about, or set the stage for more case acceptance, or, God forbid, make our marketing more effective, right? Who knew that was even possible? But it is. Small changes can make a big difference. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen Chris teach, and he's fantastic at this. And so just tell us a little bit. Now, you actually have a website. It's called Guide Them to Yes, and you actually do these workshops. What happens? Is it for doctors and the team members? So how do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, ideally it's for doctors, and if they could bring, the more of their team members they can bring, the more I can help influence them that these are ethical things they should be doing in their office, and the more likely they are to implement all the systems that I'm going to teach.
Right.
And faster.
Awesome. So we posted that as a link in the show notes and over to the side, so check it out. And then, Chris, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, I'm sure people are going to have questions. How do we get a hold of you? And, some people might be listening to this on iTunes. So how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can reach me at Dr. Chris DMD, so just DrChris DMD is my degree, at gmail.com.
Awesome, buddy. Cool, man. Well, stay on. I know there's a lot of other topics you and I are going to cover on other shows. You've built an entire call center with a software. Also, just tons of other stuff on the new patient telephone call. You're a genius on this stuff, so we're going to have you back a lot. So thank you, buddy, for being on. But just stick around for just a second while we say good night to everybody else. But thank you guys for watching. We just really appreciate this. If you found today's episode valuable, do me a favor. Just hit the share button, because we'd love for you to share that information with everybody else. And keep sending us suggestions on shows you want to see. We'll do our best to line them all up and make them happen in a reasonable time. And until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys have a great evening. Thank you.